With a population of approximately 200 million people, well, as at 2016, we're about 180 million. Nigeria has an installed capacity of 12,500 megawatts, while generating capacity hovers around 7,000 megawatts. Yet, the federal government has set a target to achieve a whopping 20 gigawatts of available electricity capacity by the end of 2020. On September 1st, Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, saddled with the responsibility to regulate electricity tariffs in Nigerian electricity supply industry, announced a new tariff regime dubbed Service Reflective Tariff, with the some attendant increase in rates paid by some consumers. Although the new electricity tariff has been suspended for a period of 2 weeks, going forward, rates paid by consumers will be tied to the level of service provided to them within a cluster. This tariff review is consistent with the federal government's target to transition the industry to a full cost-reflective tariff, eliminating the need for the government to provide subsidies to the sector. It also intends to provide a basis for higher minimum remittance by the discos to the market accounts. Joining me now to talk more and give insight into the new electricity tariff and the position of the distribution companies is the Managing Director, Chief Executive Officer of Eco Electricity Distribution Company, is Engineer Adeoye Fadeyibi. He joins us from Abuja. Thank you very much for your time, Engineer Fadeyibi.
Thank you for having me, Tolu.
Yeah, let's start the conversation with what a cost-reflective tariff means. Many really don't even understand what it means and the impact it could have on the operations of the entire sector.
Okay. I think the first part of this is to use the word itself, cost-reflective, and put that in, that itself is self-explanatory. If we put that in context in terms of electricity, the unit of electricity, the kilowatt hour, that cost is the production cost of the energy. So when we say cost reflective, the first thing you want to do is ensure you understand the production cost of the energy. If you look at in 2015, the cost of that energy was 34 naira. Nigerians at that time paid about 25 naira, with the government subsidizing the balance. In 2019, if you look at that same cost of that 1 kilowatt hour of electricity, it was 53 naira. And if you looked at it, Nigerians were still paying 31 naira due to a government subsidy that was active. Now, while this is a good intention by the government or at the time, you have to look at and being able to subsidize its citizens. What that has led to in 4 years is about a 1.7 trillion cost to the government since 2015. Today, if you look at the Nigerian government today, if they want to continue to sustain that, it will be about 12 billion naira weekly, and that's about 50 billion monthly. We understand what that is. Now, the reality is setting. So when you look at the cost-reflective tariff, even though it was being subsidized, once you had this COVID-19 and a number of other things, including backbone, which is as you know, the crude revenues, the federal government had to take a hard decision and look at discontinuing this subsidy with a phased transition that ensures that, look, you get the lowest income earners and their customer bands, basically those people protected, while ensuring that we're able to slowly get to a point that is cost-reflective for everybody. The difficult step, if you look at this in the electricity value chain, is one, every business has to kind of recover its investments, so that the sector, like any other sector, has to remain viable and continue to be attractive to critically required investment that we might get. And we have to restore liquidity into the as far as growth in the power sector. So at the end of the day, one of the key things I also wanted to see in cost reflective is over the years, if you looked at the subsidy, which was regressive, about 60% of the subsidy was going to about 10% only of the top 10% of the population. So basically, a lot of Nigerians were not getting access to electricity and were not really even enjoying the subsidy. So for me, that is where we saw what would be called a cost reflective. So again, that led to a lot of NEC consultations, which you are aware of. We tried, if you looked at the consultation with stakeholders, the initial one we tried in April, of course, did not work. That was going to take a percentage increment, and that was not acceptable to most Nigerians. So going back to methodology, a lot of the consultations happened with stakeholders. And basically the idea was to issue service-based tariffs via a MITO 2020 service reflective order. Again, that has happened. Each disco has its own, so had to do present their own submissions, and then basically we're able to put people into various bands. Without going into too much of detail, and we can, depending on what you choose to go into, Tolu, we went into A to E. Bands A to E being, again, a service reflective tariff to the extent, not only is it cost reflective, but you pay for the service which you get.
True.
And get the ability, again, within the 60-day cycle, to be able to look at your billing and ensure that you're getting what it is, that the service levels that you've been put at.
Now, just last week, the federal government and the labor unions agreed to suspend this increase for a period of 2 weeks. Now, how did you, as discos, you're one of the operators of the discos, how did you take this resolution? And what more should we expect? We know a committee has been set up. So what do we expect?
As you know, I'm also a member of that committee that was set up to look into, along with Garba Arno, the MD of Kaduna Disco. We're both on this committee, not necessarily representing just Disco's interest, but also as citizens and users of this same electricity. Along with, I'm sure you heard the minister, the honorable minister, also, you know, there was a communique where he mentioned the setting up of that committee. If we look at it, it's in national interest. I mean, I don't want to say it's a sacrifice that discos are compelled to make, but it's a directive one. So I'm not sure there was much of a choice in there. But number two, we understand that the public are saying, hold on here. They're not saying do not increase. They're saying, hold on, we'd like to understand how, which is welcome if you look at it from that perspective. The business faces a common challenge of basically containing costs while trying to drive revenue. Especially amidst this pandemic that we faced. The discos today across board are still resolving the collection challenges that were linked, again, to the energy supply during the lockdown. And then this 2 weeks freeze of these tariffs is another financial shortfall, let's call it what it is, that has to be resolved. But again, the positive side that it has enabled, a lot of helpful engagements with key stakeholders, and we hope for a positive outcome at the end of the day, and that will be beneficial to everybody in the medium to long term.
Yes, indeed. Talking about being beneficial to everybody at the end of the day, let's go back to the issue of privatization, just very briefly. A lot of people still call for the review of that process. Now, how do you take this at this time where we think we need to just focus on investing into the energy value chain?
So, you know my views on that. I mean, it's a bit of if you want to call it latent damage. I'm not a learned fellow, so I'm using that in the wrong context. But if I just spoke in basic English terms, I could see why a lot of people would feel that way. But I not only feel differently, I feel very differently, as you know, about that. I don't believe there's an issue with privatization. And it's mainly because I know the difference between the perception that is shared by most people, and in my case, the fact that I understand the privatization process. And you'll know why. It's because I've also gotten to work. I've gotten to lead two organizations, which is on the generation side, where I was able to be privileged to lead Transco Power, and then also now come to the distribution side. I get a bit more context. And I mean, when I say that, I mean today, you have a lot of monthly town hall meetings that happens where discos engage customers, both on the regulator side. You have the discos websites that are active. You have the regulator website that are active. You have media platforms. You have, the intensity of engagement in trying to get people to understand. So it's okay to ask the question and say there's issues with privatization. But I think we've come a long way, even while additional engagements are needed to help people understand it better. I say, like today, for example, the Federal Consumer Protection Council, where Tunde Rukera runs, maybe we can suggest that, public enlightenment happen. I think what people are asking for, I think we're past the stage where we say privatization is a no-no, reverse it. I think we're now at the stage where the public is actually asking for more information. They want to understand, and I think that is very welcome. So today, I think a lot of people saying privatization is an issue is probably behind, in my opinion.
Indeed. Now, almost finally, because I know you're very busy and you have other things to attend to. Talking about investment, I go back to investment again. Nigerians are expecting a lot of investments, and they are also ready to pay for what they consume. Take us through a little bit about metering and how we can make this sector more attractive and, of course, competitive for investment.
Absolutely. I think, if on a lighter note, if I started from somewhere, what I would tell you was, let's start when we say we want to make this sector attractive and let people pay for what they get. I think the best part is to start by preaching the word about energy consumption habits. I think as a nation, we are now forced to slowly start understanding, especially when the subsidy starts to go away. You start to change lifestyle. I think, the whole 24/7 power, high wattage light bulbs, ACs on all the time, all those will have to go away in terms of energy consumption habits. But in terms of metering, as you know, there's been a lot of headway made in the last few weeks, thanks to some of the work that was done at the Vice President's office and the directives that were given. We've gotten engagement from places like CBN, Ministry of Finance, where I'm talking all these ministries. I'm talking Ministry of Power. It's at the highest levels where the ministers are directly engaging us. The CBN governor is directly engaging us. The DISCOs are actively involved. The meter manufacturers are actively involved. And what I would say to that is that when you see a gap of about 6 million meters, what has happened is that you've gotten a sort of intervention where the World Bank is also involved. And the first phase of this, which is good news to Nigerians, I don't want to take away from when the presidency will tell the people. But what I can tell you is that there's been a bit of a handshake between ourselves and the necessary stakeholders to ensure that there can be a massive rollout of meters and the funding made available with some backing from even the federal government. So that is good news. So if we can get the metering done, we can account for the energy, and in that way we start to ensure that people are paying for the energy that they receive. But more importantly, the DISCOs are also tasked with ensuring that we put in a lot more investment, even more than before, in trying to strengthen our feeders so people can get the necessary supply hours that they need.
Let's round up on this note. There have been a lot of challenges, vandalism, even your workers being assaulted, and a lot of issues happening, deaths and all of that. Round up on that note. Highlight some of these challenges that you face in your day-to-day business challenges or business activities.
Okay, so it also happens to be, this week happens to be our customer care week across board. And, for us, our theme this year is Dream Team, right? So we're ensuring that we get to work with our own people, not just us, but we get feedback every day, positive and negative. And we welcome it because the negative feedback is not always bad as long as it's objective. It allows us to be able to go back to the table and plan. Today, if I was to name 4 of my biggest issues, one will be assault on staff. I think they're fellow Nigerians, they're brothers and sisters. I think they represent the company, but assault on staff is a no-no. I think energy theft, even though it's significantly improved in terms of the levels, but it's something that continues to be a worry for me. Network challenges today, both technical and non-technical, is something that I have to ensure that as a team, we continue to reduce the outage time to customers so that we can reduce agitation and get them on our side a bit more. And then probably the fourth and maybe not the largest is the rising business cost. So while we're complaining about these cost reflective issues, while you're watching the general business cost still rising, again, the ad hoc committee, I don't want to preempt them, but I'm sure in the next coming days you would hear from them when final decisions are made. But I can tell you there will be some good news in terms of the direction we're going, because we have to stop the bleeding. Somehow the business cost needs to be managed so that it's in line with what people can pay.
Engineer Adio Ifade-Ibi, CEO Ike EDC, as a co-electricity distribution company. Thank you very much for your time joining us on Business Nigeria this Monday.
Thank you very much.